In our first week, we looked at how election isn't about a political process. For us, it's a Christian doctrine that helps us understand how we can be included in God's plans. People used to think that you could only get to heaven if you were Jewish. But God doesn't judge us based on our ethnicity. God looks at our hearts. And if we ask God to save us, God says yes. We cross over from the category of unsaved into the category of the elect of God. And no matter what happens in this world, if we put our trust in God, we know we will be saved. It can't change. It is a certain reality. It doesn't mean God picked me and He didn't pick you. It doesn't mean we are better than other people. It means we are God's people, period. Last week we looked at the first thing we do in response to this reality. The Apostle Paul said when you get saved, it's such good news that you've got to tell other people about it. That is our first response. We share the good things that are happening in our lives through God. Our good news is that hungry people are fed. The homeless have a place to go. Lonely people find community in our church, and lives are changed for the good. Today we continue on that same path. When we trust God, we are part of this group in the election. So what do we do about it? We tell others, and we live differently. We live as saints. That's what we're talking about today. But when you bring up the word election this time of year, people's minds go straight to the political kind. We have a very important presidential election in just a few days. Does our role as the elect influence who we vote for, or at least what we look for in our candidates? I dare say it does. So here's a political joke before we move on to the topic of saints. A little boy who wanted $100 very badly prayed for 2 weeks, but nothing happened. Then he decided to write God a letter requesting $100. When the postal authorities received the letter addressed to God, USA, they decided to send it to the president. The president was so impressed and amused that he instructed his secretary to send the boy $50. Mr. President thought that this would appear to be a lot of money to the little boy, so it should be enough. The little boy was delighted with the $50 and immediately sat down to write a thank you note to God that read, "Dear God, thank you very much for sending me the money. However, I noticed that for some reason you had to send it through Washington, D.C., and as usual, those devils took half of it." So we know a politician that takes half your money is no saint, but who is? What does it mean to be a saint? In some churches, it means a special group of people that have died and lived extraordinary lives for God. Then they are canonized and called saints, like Mother Teresa or Saint Francis. But being a saint could also mean it's a person who has died and we believe has gone to heaven, right? We say, Grandma was a saint. Grandpa, maybe not so much, but Grandma, she definitely went to heaven. We say things along these lines, but really these are actually later meanings for the word saint. The way it was originally used and the way the Bible talks about it, saint simply means you are a Christian. You are a believer. So if you put your trust in Jesus, you are a saint. Our 7th and 8th graders go through confirmation class before they become members of the church, and I always share with them this idea of who it is that is really a saint. Then I ask them to interview someone that they would say is a saint. Most of them make it as easy as possible, and they interview their parents. And when they ask their parents, how does it feel to be a saint, the parents always respond, I'm not a saint. People think you have to be special to be a saint, or you have to be dead first, or maybe they're just trying to be modest. I get that. In the United Methodist Church, we look to the life of John Wesley, who lived in the 1700s and was the founder of our church. He would say that all Christians need to work towards what he calls perfect love. That no matter what someone does or says or how they hurt you, your response is always total love for the person. He taught this his whole life and identified people who he said had reached that place in life. They loved others always, without fail. Yet when people asked him whether he had perfect love, he never said yes. He always deferred to others. He was being modest. So maybe that's something saints do. They are humble and don't think too highly of themselves. But when we make this very ordinary connection that the Bible makes of being a Christian and being called a saint, I think that's a title we can wear proudly. You are one of God's people. You are in a room full of family right now. You belong here, and we can call each other saints. It doesn't matter if you have made mistakes along the way. We've all done things we regret. We've all hurt people unintentionally and sometimes even intentionally. But that doesn't disqualify us from being a saint. It means we are human and we still have a long way to go. I think of the people whose lives we celebrate today. John Maxon, who served others and gave regularly to the pastor's discretionary fund and the food pantry. He was making people's lives better even if he didn't know them. Marianne Smith, who was the wife of the Reverend Ken Smith, she blessed people with her dear friendship and love of life. Bill Weaver, the husband of our own dear Carol Weaver, he was kind and gentlemanly. He raised money for crippled children and those in need. Colin Everett was a recent college graduate who touched many lives. If you were here for his funeral, you heard about the dozens of people he impacted when he brought them together as he found friends and helped them make connections with each other. And Bob Davidson, a former pastor here, he touched hundreds through his ministry and countless others throughout his life. He helped people know Jesus through his kindness. Cindy says he was like Santa Claus. Giving with a generous spirit is a hallmark of what it means to love one another. These saints are an example for us in what it looks like to be a living saint, to do God's will, to bless others with our lives. I want to pause for a moment to show you a video. It's just a short clip, but I think it's meaningful here. This is the Philadelphia Opera Company. They decided to do what they called a random act of culture at a Macy's store in Philadelphia. Take a look. So I think what the Philadelphia Opera did there, as they gathered together in that Macy's and shared with everyone there in that beautiful space, I think what they did was nice. It proclaimed God as King of Kings, which is good. It blessed people, even as some of the people singing might say, they are not even Christians themselves. Doing this was a kind thing. We might even say it's a good thing, and sometimes non-Christians are better than us at being good. We should take inspiration from them. But we are not called to be good. We are called to be godly. And the way we cross over from good to godly is when we follow Wesley's example, when we love no matter the circumstances. When we are good to people, not because they are good to us, not just randomly to strangers, but when we are good even when they are bad. That is godly. That is the life of a saint. James chapter 2 talks about this problem the early church had where they welcomed in the rich, fancy people and they ignored the poor. James tells them, stop doing that. God has chosen even the poor to be rich in faith. Then he says, you need to fulfill the royal law from God. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is the standard for every saint, for every Christian. Love. We are part of the election. And our calling card is love. So Tuesday you go to the polls. Does this election as a Christian have any implications on who you vote for? You better believe it does. We vote for candidates that are going on to perfection, that are serious about their faith, that love others and work to enact laws that will help everyone to better love their neighbors. We are God's elect, and we help the world know what real love looks like. Amen? Amen. Amen. We're going to take a couple of minutes here to receive Holy Communion. I invite those who are assisting in Holy Communion to come forward at this time.